vaccination. And when you talk about one of the sectors that I don't think this will be a good reference, but when you say donkeys for this country and runs this country in terms of the hard work they input, the amount of jobs they create, then you cannot dissect that from the Jua Kali sector. And majority of this sector players are also informal. So right now I'm joined by Richard Muteti, who is the CEO of the Kenya National Federation of Jua Kali Associations. And Mr. Muteti, I know we are in that year of elections. We are also recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, but just looking in hindsight so far for the first quarter of the year 2022, has been the Jua Kali sector's performance?
Well, that's a good question. I can say that we have started to recover from the effects of COVID. As you know, we had been thoroughly affected. The informal economic sector had been thoroughly affected. Actually, it was the first sector that was hit thoroughly by the effects. But I can say that we are coping and we are doing what we do best. We are creating more jobs for this country.
Because, you know, recovery, we are in that phase of recovery. And when you look at the informal sector, in terms of support, we saw the government coming through and helping, you know, in some areas, propping up some sectors just to make sure that the bounce back is a little bit easier for the investors in those particular sectors. For the Jua Kali sector, what was done in regards to help bounce back?
Well, initially it was, of course, a lot of confusion, and there was a lot of uncoordinated efforts that sprung around. And in that period, you're aware that the informal economic sector, especially the Jua Kali artisans, are resilient people. They jumped into action and turned the then challenge into opportunities. For example, you saw them producing masks, you saw them manufacturing stands for water dispensers, you saw them manufacturing disinfectants and so on. So later, when things came to be a bit clear on how we really needed to be assisted, several partners came around. We partnered with the chamber, and through MasterCard, our people got some soft loans, some loans that did not require to be paid with interest. Apart from that, we got orders also through the same channel. Our members started supplying, producing and supplying masks to KEMSA, and we did quite a lot around that. You are aware that the Jua Kali sector, especially the woodwork dealers, were given orders by the government to supply school desks and school chairs. You're also aware that we are one of the biggest beneficiaries of the affordable housing, where now our metal fabricators and wood makers now, they started supplying a lot of doors and windows for the affordable housing. So I can say that several initiatives came by and really boosted the sector.
Looking at the players within the Jua Kali sector, I mean, even the Kenyan economy, just looking at the business landscape, hugely informal. Why do majority of businesses remain informal, and government's effort to formalize our businesses so far, from your assessment, has it been successful?
Well, it is a fact that in Kenya, and indeed in the East Africa community and in Africa, okay, let's say in Africa and the developing countries, we have seen that the trend, the biggest producers of employment are the informal economic sector players, majority of whom operate in micro and small enterprises sector. When you talk about formalization, where I think there are a lot of also, again, uncoordinated efforts to try to formalize the informal economic sector. One of the biggest disconnection is that most of these initiatives happen without consultations with the informal economic sector players themselves. For example, what is formalization? Formalization is a situation whereby whatever you do for a living and you earn from it is registered by the government. You pay some taxes. You are able to use your records to get loans. You're operating in a legitimate area where you can be found and where you can be, you know, those kind of factors. But if we work backwards, you realize that when you talk about formalizing in the informal economic sector, several things need to be addressed initially so that the environment, the operating environment for the informal economic sector can also be acceptable to them so that they're not operating under the covers of shadows. For example, you cannot formalize a sector without talking about taxes. What are our tax brackets issues? And I have discussed this before here with you. I've appeared in several panels to discuss about taxes. I'm happy that KRA now have set up a dedicated point for the informal economic sector. But what I'm still saying is that we still need a deliberately targeted informal sector approach on tax issues, so that the more than 16.4 million informal economic sector players can also feel that they're contributing to this country and they're in it. But again, this is not to say that the informal economic sector do not pay taxes. We pay a lot of VATs, we pay a lot of things. We are participating in the daily economy. That is one, taxation. Two, registration of where you operate from. You know, most of our informal economic sector players, this is a daily economy. Most of them do not have permanent places where they operate from. So when you talk about formalization, and I really urge the government to, when they are taking some course or some actions, let them consult. Sometimes various agencies operate as if the informal economic sector in this country are not organized, and that's where we go wrong. Okay. That's where the disconnections begins. We get a lot of academic approaches with people seated in offices, then they come to try to force it to the informal economic sector. That's where the disconnect is. Yes. The informal economic sector really want to be formalized, but in an organized manner, so that they also feel as part of the society.
All right. Very important. So you've talked of taxation regime, streamlining that. And also, when you talk about registration, it should be done with the people on the ground in mind, understanding the dynamics. And talk about one huge dynamic is matters to do with the election. We know that during election year, economically, there is that uncertainty. Now, people in the informal sector, we cannot afford to bend to the uncertainties. But just looking even the upcoming election, how is the sector shielding itself from the shocks that might be there due to, you know, the politicking season?
Well, that's a good question, and we have faced several elections in this country. I must say that the informal economic sector this time is a bit more prepared than it used to be. I'm happy to report to you that some time back, and as you can know, the informal economic sector forms the biggest voting bloc in this country. Mm-hmm. As I told you earlier, we are talking about more than 16.4 million Kenyans that are spread across three major subsectors. If I can name them, we have the manufacturing sector or micro and small industries, where the artisans operate from, who manufacture products. That sector itself alone is divided into 18 subsectors. Then we have small traders that you find them in the markets, the council markets, county markets, and so on. We also along that category, we have the hawkers and so on. Then we have the service providers. Then we have the agro-based. Mm-hmm. So initially, and as you can see even in your daily news and so on during elections and the campaigning periods, most of these campaigns happen on the informal sector clusters. They happen on our markets, they happen on our work sites. I can tell you that they interfere with our daily operations. Mm-hmm. But because this is the time that our people also looked, this was also the time some of our informal economic sector players also make high while the sun shines. Yes. The other thing is predictability of security and stability. And that's why I'm happy that I see the Minister for Internal Security, Dr. Matiang'i, has called for a meeting with the private sector through KEPSA on Monday, and I'm sure some of these things will be discussed on that forum. We are, as concerned as any private sector person in this country, because we want predictability, we want continuity, and we want assurance of our businesses being able to continue. What we're trying to avoid is tension. What I can tell you is that as a sector, you will find our members who belong to different political divides. They work together every day, and they live together. The only problem is when it comes to incitement. I also appeal to it's called what, this commission for
NCIC?
Yes, NCIC. I see it has a lot of programs going around. It has not reached out to the informal economic sector. It has not in particular reached out to the Jua Kali sector. And I tell you, some time back we were trained, our artisans were trained by the Office of the President about the Nyumba Kumi concept, where we realized that some time back, without knowing, our members also contributed to some untoward incidences of preparing and manufacturing weapons, now which we are not doing. We didn't do in our previous time. We need to, what I'm saying is that the various agencies need to put their act together and approach the informal economic sector in an organized manner, so that we also contribute towards this peace that people are talking about.
Definitely, very important. At the end of the day, when business is done, I mean, the foundations of good business and prosperity is peace and, proper relations between people, and the informal sector is leading that. Thank you very much. Richard Mutete, CEO, Kenya National Federation of Jua Kali Associations, telling us the latest on the informal sector. We take a short break right here on Business Today. When we come back, we have BBC Money Daily, and thereafter we go to the ground to speak to the Jua Kali artisans. Stay tuned.